Okay, it says it's setting up, so we should be live in about 10 seconds. Okay, I think we are live. So hello, everybody. This is our third day of the symposium, and today we have a set of great speakers coming from London. Correct me if I'm right. And yeah, so today we have fascinating material on storytelling, storytelling and VR, and you are most welcome in this third day. To allow more speakers to come, I would like to put a 2 minutes short video that will give you the highlights of the speakers, and also just to allow 1 to 2 minutes for all the speakers to come. So I will just put this little video, and I will be back in another 2 minutes, allowing more people to come and join this meeting. Oh. I hope you can hear the sound as well. So as I mentioned, today is our special panel on virtual reality and storytelling. My name is Dr. Lucas Forwell. I'm the host of the symposium. Today we have special sets of speakers, starting with Juliana Franklin, who is the special panel moderator. She's followed by Anastasia Burova today. We have Austin Hill with us. We have Molly Bannister. So this is our great set of speakers, and we have VR storytelling medium and challenges, opportunities provides for both creators. The importance of storytelling as an influence in the life of people. I will not read it, you can see that. We will have maybe one break in the middle to allow short coffee break so that you don't need to stay glued to the screen for too long. And without further ado, I will forward to the panel, to the discussion panel. Iliana, would you like to take over with the introduction?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. Good evening, Lucas, and thank you for the opportunity to make this panel go ahead today. I am Iliana Franklin, and I'm representing MediaFrame Ltd from London, which is a media company, and I have been lucky to be able to also teach at one of the top media schools in Europe, which is Escape Studios. And tonight I'm going to host a panel with my graduate students, which I can call today my colleagues, because they have just graduated from their master course in storyboarding and pre-visualization. So if you allow me to open my presentation and introduce you to their wonderful work. And just to give you a little bit of background about what we have been doing in the last year. On 30th of September 2019, Escape Studio launched an animation world first master's degree in pre-visualization and storyboarding. So this was the first course of this kind. Do you see my screen, Lucas? I would like to share the presentation which I have prepared. So if you just bear with me for 1 second, and hopefully I will be able to share with you. So yeah, so this should be visible.
Just one thing, Iliana, if you have any video, you have to take that share sound button there, okay? There is a,
yes.
there is a,
I will ask you about this when we come to it, because
okay.
I have one clip later on.
Okay, no problem.
But thank you for mentioning that, Lucas. So, a few words about the course. The course was developed as a part of the animation department, which is headed by Alex Williams, and it was planned with the help of industry and validated by the University of Kent. It offers a degree which gives a unique opportunity to learn industry level skills and also earn an internationally recognized academic qualification. Our first cohort is now graduating. Entering our course from 5 different disciplines, our master students have done an amazing body of work, which I'm proud to show you before handing the floor over to them. A cinematographer, a fine artist, a 2D animator, a concept artist, and a 3D generalist. Diving into the story together produced some remarkable results and are graduating with director credits on their first short films. A few words about them. So here is Austin Hill. Having a background as freelance director and cinematographer, Austin Hill is now pursuing a career in storyboarding and pre-visualization. He takes this opportunity to expand his abilities and methods of visual storytelling for multiple mediums, from traditional 2D animation to 3D to VR. Austin wrote and directed Street Rats, which has been nominated in the category Best Trailer at the Azzurro Film Festival in Milan. Anastasia Gurova is a young author and director known for her short film Animal Lover, Gordinho, and Brudiaga. Her background is in fine art and animation, and she now specializes in story direction and pre-visualization. Molly Babington is an animation director specializing in storyboarding and pre-visualization. Her interest is in immersive storytelling in both games and film production. Her director's credits include the short films Moon Rocks and The Ratcatcher. Molly also has credits in several short animated films projects. She is an avid game player and an expert in both 2D and 3D art, animation, modeling, and rendering. Stevie Stedman specializes in writing, directing, storyboarding, and pre-visualization. She is the author and director of the short animated film Hat Shop and the producer of Moon Rocks. She has been involved in a number of projects for film and TV as editor and story consultant, and has an interest in screenplay writing and directing for VR production. And Leroy Diaz, who is a director specialized in feature films, TV, and games, known for his projects Tantrum Yoga and the adaptations of The Gift of Magi, The Sniper, and The Lumber Room. He specializes in writing, directing, storyboarding, and pre-visualization for animation, live action, and games. Leroy's most recent work is focused on storyboarding for VR. I'm going to say a few words about the journey of these stories and how do we proceed and how do we get to the virtual reality production process. So the storytelling process usually begins with prose, but sometimes it begins with a picture like this one. And from these, the ideas are formed. A few sketch strokes can lead our imagination to form design concepts and bring the characters into the story, like these ones from Leroy Diaz. And then the story begins. It can be broken down into its main beats, the emotions that move the story forward and keep the audience in their seats. When the storyboard is ready, we export the storyboard panels into a movie clip and comp it with sound, music, and dialogue. we add the dimension of time as well. And then we begin to set up the previs using various techniques, combination of 2D, 3D modeling, painting, simulations, rigging, rendering, and so on. Sometimes we can overcome our limitations in our ability and knowledge of traditional drawing using combination of 3D and 2D approaches. And this is an example of setting a correct perspective using 3D set for the character's performance, where the character is hand-drawn and superimposed onto a 3D set. We also prepare images for pitch, such as posters and one-page outline for marketing purposes. Then we go through rigging and character setup, which is quite a technical process. And this is an example from Molly Babington's project, The Moon Rocks. And then we prepare look dev concepts. Pre-production takes us on a journey into the art of drawing and painting. And this is an example of Anastasia's concept art for her projects. We can explore the territory of the independent filmmaking, adaptation, and writing dialogue. And we design environments. We design environment concepts and spaces where stories take place. And finally, we take the concepts into a previous phase, modeling from our planning and design. During this journey, we start to visualize the concepts using materials, textures, and lights. And we learn how to direct the story, working with teams of other artists. And finally, we created the pitch concept for TV series. Inspired by our journey, we discovered that it would make a great story in VR. So we decided to take our first forays into the world of VR production and see how can we travel through space. And now I want to welcome my panelists to present the research they have compiled in preparation for telling story within a VR environment. Austin Hill will present his topic, which is VR as a storytelling medium, and the challenges and opportunities it provides for both the creators and the audience. Hope you will enjoy it. Austin?
Hi, hello everyone. I'll just share my screen as well.
Please.
It should be seen as now, yes. Cool. Right, so yes, hello, my name is Austin Hill, and I'll be looking and talking about the strengths and weaknesses of VR as a storytelling medium, and like the kind of obstacles and things to think about if you want to use it for a particular story that you want to tell with it. So we're going to use the previously mentioned project Terra Terra as an example of how to adapt something into VR. So what do we know about Terra Terra? Well, it's a family animated show. It's got sci-fi elements into it. It's a family comedy, and it's targeted to a young audience. So you got all that to think about. So it sounds very high concept at first, like, oh, how do we deal with this sci-fi? We've got family elements, we've got comedy. How do we bring this into a VR medium? Well, if you want to make something into a VR medium, it's important to keep these quotes in mind, such as this one from Marshall McLuhan, which is that the medium is the message. And by that, he means it's not necessarily the idea of a story that's being expressed here. It's actually the medium itself, in this case, VR. How is VR being expressed? And the other quote to keep in mind is from Linda Hutchin, which is, while no medium is good at one thing than the other, some are better at tackling, can aim at, apologies. Some things can aim better than other things like genres. So with that in mind, we have to think about the other mediums that there are, such as literature and radio, which play a lot more on imagination. Now, literature, you do a lot more reading, apart from like graphic novels and comic books, which use images to help you, but you still use a lot of imagination to see the full, to imagine the scene in full. Same with radio, you have a lot of sound, a lot of audio cues to recognize and help visualize what's happening in the stated drama. But the two other mediums that we want to actually keep in mind is that VR kind of lends into is actually theater and film and TV, because VR is in this weird, nice spot where it's a mesh of both theater and film and TV. Mostly like theater, by the way it directs audiences' attention. Like for example, here in this picture from Hamilton, look at how your eyes are immediately directed to the center of the screen. You're looking at the character in the center, and it uses elements of theater and to help direct that. You have the way the ensemble are blocking, the way they look. You have the lighting, you have audio cues. Who's talking? You look at to who's talking. You look at to where everyone is looking. And even if you gaze up to the rafters, you can see everyone's looking down. So naturally, you look down to see what they're looking at. Because theater, unlike film and TV, you don't get the advantage of a close-up or a cutaway or anything like that. But theater, you get more immersed in. But like VR allows that kind of similar kind of immersion, but in a more, actually a slightly more different way, because VR has been referred to as more of a empathy engine, because it allows the audience and the viewer to get more of a presence by the way it tricks the mind and the body, and that the viewer is experiencing a real experience when really they're experiencing a virtual experience. So when they recall it later, they feel like it's a real one. This can actually be seen in the Ritchie's plank experience by how these people react. My palms are sweaty, OF. But of course, there are other obstacles to overcome, such as, unfortunately, VR tech itself. Some require controls. Do you want your audience or your viewers to actually have a controller? Some people might not want to have that. Some people just might want to sit back and watch and not actually move around. Speaking of movement, some people don't like moving. If you're going to have moving, that brings a whole other element of where do you want people to look? Where do you want your audience to look? Where do you want your audience to be? So you have to make sure you guide your audience that way. Then there's camera quality. Most VR experiences are usually animated to some extent, because live action has completely other kind of obstacles that you need to overcome. While something's animated, you can have more creative control. You can do things more precise. While live action, there's a lot more variables, and also, of course, camera quality. If something's out of focus, or if it doesn't quite mesh with what's being on screen, it might cause headaches or eyesore or sickness in that case. And then there's audio. Not all headsets come with audio devices. This usually happens a lot more in educational or gimmick VR or tool training, where the viewer are being talked to by an outside source about the situation. So you got to think about what kind of experience you want the audience to have, and that's the key word here, audience. And the other question to ask is, are they a passive or are they a participant? Now, if they're a passive audience, the VR experience becomes more on rails. They kind of sit back and let the story or the experience kind of unfold around them. Now, when VR started off as a VR experience, it was used very gimmickly, used more as a gimmick rather than an actual storytelling tool. You can see this with examples as being used as promotional material, as seen here with as a promotion for Warcraft. You're just sitting on I don't know my Warcraft lore that well, but you're just sitting on the back of a giant bird as you fly over a city. Not much story, just to wow you that you are in this location. But of course, we've learned from that. People have learned that from and developed more better experiences, stories for VR. This can be seen in other promotional materials, such as for the Lego Batman, where you have characters actually more interact with you. They come to your personal space, you become more friendly with them, and it encourages you to actually use the 360 and look around. A recent example of this is actually the Myth A Frozen Tale. It's a VR experience to promote Frozen 2. And in that, it's a narrated piece with creatures coming up close, plays on scale. It does something that the Frozen 2 movie can't exactly do, which is give you a sense of the scale of the world and the creatures and the environments. Because when you see a horse on screen, you don't really get a sense of scale. But when you're in VR and you have it coming close, it recognizes your presence, you look up, you see it, and you go, oh, wow, that is a big horse, actually. I didn't realize horses were that big. Or in this case, or when a stone giant stands over you, you get more of an awe. And since it is being narrated, and since in the context of the story, it is a story, almost like a fairy tale being told to you, you have more suspension of disbelief. And of course, you have the changing environments and different colors to give you a different mood, gives you more of a wow factor. You get more of an emotional response from it. But of course, this is all content that's extension from, well, pre-existing content, World of Warcraft, Lego Batman, Frozen 2. So what about the original stories? Well, originally there was some at first. There's Google uploaded some onto YouTube back in 2016, such as Pearl and Help. Now, Pearl does utilize a great sense of direction. You know, you're looking at people's reaction. You look from like him looking at here at the doorway to the back seat, and you read his emotions. However, it doesn't quite use the whole 360 experience, since you are kind of unnaturally in the front seat, and you usually throughout the whole piece you are looking at the back seat and the front seat. That's usually your main focus of attention. You don't get to see. It doesn't utilize the whole environment that well. Then there's also Help, which has live action actors. They are in a 3D environment, so you get this sort of unnatural, uncanny valley that doesn't quite mesh well with human people in a 3D world. But of course, a recent example is another good recent example is actually Cycles. This is another 360 experience where you, the audience, are situated in a home. You get to see the story unfold around you. You get a sense of history, just like the director, Jeff Gibson, wanted the the audience to experience. You get a sense of history, you get a sense of space, you get to see the story unfold, and it tells a personal story. You get attached to it, you see it, you get to a sense of, since being in this home, you get a sense of presence, you get a sense of history. And of course, this actually kind of almost leads into educational videos as well, for that VR is useful. This is another passive experience, since a lot of a VR experience for education is usually rather cheap, since you have a lot of people using it or going through it. They don't usually have earphones, and they don't actually have time to tell a story. It's more, again, more of a teaching tool and more of, not much of a story, more of an informative piece, so they can just get told information. And this is used in the training sector as well. But what happens if it's an interactive entertainment? What happens if you want your player to interact more with what's going on in the VR experience? Well, that kind of actually leads more into video game storytelling, especially if you want to tell a story in it. And with that, you actually have to approach story from a video game kind of narrative, in the sense of, is it just background flavor? It's just a setup and then it's just the experience? Or is it interwoven with the gameplay and structure where it recognizes player action? Now, despite whatever game it is, they always kind of follow the simple 3-act structure to a level or to the overall game. You have setup, you have conflict, and then you have the resolution. A good example of this can actually be seen in the VR game Half-Life Alyx, where the player action is, pushes the story forward, it recognizes it, and you follow the story at your own pace. One particular level of note is during a particular level when you are stuck in a brewery and you're introduced to the monster Jeff. This is the setup. You get there, find out what the monster is, and then of course you have the conflict. You use now. Half-Life Alyx is made for VR, so it utilizes the VR medium to tell the story and give you an emotional reaction and experience. In this case, as seen in this example, having the monster Jeff close into your personal space. Now, usually when people play horror games or watch horror, you have a screen detachment. It'd be scary for a moment, but then you can laugh it off later. But when you're in a VR set, when you have something like that close to you, you get a more different reaction. It feels more personal. You get that sense of fear that you don't usually get. So of course that gives a stronger presence. And of course, when you look back and record it later, you record it like a real experience. And of course, there's a resolution. You get past the level by the game recognizing your action, and such as throwing a bottle. But this, of course, this game requires a lot of movement. You have to move around a lot. What happens if you don't want to move around? What happens if you don't have enough space? Well, then you get more into puzzle room games like this one, like I Expected to Die, where you're just situated in a spot and you just have to just look around and just reach out into the environment to figure out clues. Now, of course, it's interwoven with the story, and the puzzle is interwoven with the story, and you don't proceed until you do something as well, recognizing your action, and seeing how your actions actually affect the environment around you to help solve this puzzle. But of course, these are games for older audiences. What was for younger audiences who want to get to the VR games or more an interactive VR experience? Well, they tend to be like, Rec Room, Peerhead Arcade, Astrobot. These tend to be a bit more gimmicky, more arcadey, but there's more focus on the gameplay rather than the story. Again, the story is background flavor for the VR experience. So what does that mean for Terra? What do we need to do for Terra? How do we bring this into VR? Well, we know if we're going to make a VR experience, it's an extension. It's a show about an alien family that go to Earth while they're aliens. Of course, it has a young audience. But they're aliens, they're going from space. We can have an on-rails experience of the spaceship going through the solar system. Oh, in that case, we can actually make it educational, since luckily we have it targeted to a young audience. So they could be in the back of a spaceship, they can fly by Mars, you can give them facts like, oh, Mars may be red, but it's actually really cold down there, or an exciting moment when the family have to dodge asteroids, while they go through the asteroid belt, or a comedic moment when inside the spaceship as you see the family interact. But of course, while the VR experience will give people more emotional reaction, sometimes it's important that the story gives that similar kind of like emotional reaction, like cycles giving you a sense of like how giving you a sense of more letting you see the personal story about it. So that's where my colleague Anastasia Gurova will take over and talk about will take over. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Austin. Sorry, just before Anastasia steps in, I would like to say thank you to Austin and say this was a brilliant presentation, and the questions of what makes the story interesting and emotional is the next presentation going to answer this question, the importance of storytelling as a form of influence in the life of people. Anastasia Gurova.
Hello, that's me. I'm Anastasia. I'm gonna share my screen so you can see my presentation. Here we go. So I'm gonna talk, as Iliana mentioned, about the influence of true storytelling. And I will reconnect to what my colleague Austin Hill was saying, the phrase of Eric Donald's about virtual reality, that it's an empathy engine. Let's say Eric Donald, he started his TED talk in about 2015 saying, what if you could jump into an animated movie and be part of it? So the storytelling proposed have always been that of trying to make the audience be part of the story as much as possible. And I believe that virtual reality is the ultimate way of literally be part of the story. So now, before talking about the influence through storytelling, which is my main topic, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself. So my first approach to storytelling was when I was about 4, 5, 6 years old. I was trying to draw some comicses. I called them comicses, but it was just a series of images that made sense only probably in the mind of a kid, because I had 0 art skills, I had 0 storytelling skills. But anyways, I kept trying in years to create various stories, and I kept failing, and I couldn't understand why, because I was reading so many books, I was consuming tons of classic books, comics, to find any kind of inspiration to create a good story. Sometimes I was even copying some of the character profiles to see if I could succeed somehow, but I kept failing. And it was not before the end of high school that I started to to think about what it is that makes the story appealing and how to bring the audience, the people, to have faith in your story, because it's all about having faith in the story, believing in a good story. So that was the time I was about 17 or 18 years old when I started to approach the world of influence through storytelling. So instead of reading classic books and comics, I started digging into human psychology, and I started reading a lot of books about psychology, joining life coaching seminars, psychology seminars, all this to understand how human brain and how human heart works. So I was really impressed by David J.P. Phillips' talks about the science of storytelling. He made a really good point by saying that we are born as storytellers. And it was quite mind-blowing for me because I love storytelling, but I'm as well a shy person. So it was difficult for me to believe at first that storytelling is intrinsic in our nature. But in fact, if you think about history, this is quite true. If you think that 100,000 years ago, when we started to develop our language, we started to use storytelling to transfer our knowledge from generation to generation. And about 27,000 years ago, we started to transfer this knowledge, our knowledge, to cave painting, which is another form of storytelling, and so on like this, 3,000 years ago through text, and now through any kind of media. So storytelling is a very powerful tool, especially through virtual reality. Jeremy Beilenson, he's a professor at Stanford University, and he's as well an expert in virtual reality. In one of his talks, he said that in this new era of online meetings, and especially in this pandemic period that we are living for several months now, virtual reality can help us free from the screen frame, which I find completely true. Going back to storytelling, another very interesting fact about it is that storytelling can activate the same hormones and neurotransmitters of a person that is in love. So hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins are activated when we are listening or watching a good story. And all this is very well explained again by David J.P. Phillips in one of his talks. He made great examples of what these hormones are making to our brain and body. I will try to replicate some of these examples here. So when we are curious and expecting something to happen, something that we are experiencing every time that we are watching or listening to a good story, dopamine is released in our blood, and that means that we become more focused, more motivated, and we have better memory. When we feel empathy towards somebody, oxytocin is released in our blood, which means that we become more generous, trustworthy, and kind. And when we make somebody laugh, endorphins are released in our blood. So we become more creative, relaxed, and focused. And in general, when we are laughing, our life is just better. Let's move on. The main point here is, how do we make the story good? How do we make appealing to our audience? And what I understood from studying human psychology, and this is very well explained in the book, The Story Factor by Annette Simmons. It was like a Bible for me for a certain period of my life. The main point is that people tend to value their own conclusions more highly than yours. They will only have faith in a story that has become real for them. So to have faith in your story or to be influenced by you, people's first requirement is to have trust in you or in the character that you're creating in your story. So to have trust in you, in any kind of interaction that we are having with people, there will always be two questions, which are, who are you and why you are there? So if you don't take enough time to give a positive answer to these two questions, whether it is in your life or in the life of the characters that you're creating in your story, people will tend to not have faith in your story, and they will proceed to make their own conclusions. And unfortunately, usually they will be negative. Because That's how human nature is. We tend to instinctively erect barriers and suspicion to protect ourselves. So we need to take enough time to introduce our characters. I will quickly show you the Terra animatic of the teaser that me and my colleagues were making in our MA course at Escape Studios. Here are some of the character studies that I've made in which I tried to study the psychology of the characters, the way they move, and the characters. These are the characters that you will be seeing in the teaser that I will be showing you now. Here we go. So this is the teaser based on Stevie Stedman's script. We decided to concentrate mainly on presenting the characters through interaction between each other and some fantasies that these kids are having about their life on planet Earth. I've made this edited version of the teaser to show you some of the bits, just to make you understand the way I contributed into making the characters more appealing. So in drawing the characters, I tried to push a little bit their acting and the way they move. I pushed the expressions as well to make the story more funny, for the audience to have a boost of endorphins in their blood. And so if we are able to present our characters in a good way, if we take enough time to present them, we allow people to identify with these characters. And in this way, we create empathy. So I'm going to stop. To conclude my speech, I will reconnect to the phrase of Eric Donalds about virtual reality, that it is an empathy engine. I totally agree with it, but I as well agree with the phrase of Anthony Geffen when he says that technology that is evolving at a speed of light, new technology coming out every day almost. All this medium has to be driven by storytelling. Storytelling needs to push technology. And thank you very much for listening. I will pass my word now to my colleague, Stevie Stedman. Thank you a lot. Let me stop sharing. One sec. Stop sharing. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. It was very nice presentation from you as well. Very interesting to learn what's going on in our brains. At the moment, I think you just need to stop sharing your screen. Oh, you did. Wonderful. So we gave the floor to Stevie Stedman, and Stevie is going to talk about writing a script for real-time immersive format. Stevie, floor over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Sorry I don't have a webcam, and I couldn't quite work out how to put an image on here, so I stuck it onto my presentation. I'll just share my screen with you.
Thank you, Stevie.
This should be showing the correct screen. If you can see script writing for VR.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Sorry, I can't see.
We can see.
Excellent. So my name is Stevie Stedman, and this is my lovely face in the corner. My colleagues have applied to you with a lot of information to mull over and many examples of how VR has benefited us within storytelling. So here I'd like to offer you a question instead. When you think about script writing, what is it that you imagine? Is it theatre production, exit stage left pursued by bear? Or perhaps something more rigid like screenwriting for television, where there's a lot less room for flexibility? I find that when we think about VR, we automatically turn to game production and, to a lesser extent, education. We don't necessarily think about poetry or cinema. And this is what I want to talk about: the things that we create outside of the expected normal use. I want to ask you, what methods are available to us? How have we utilized them over the course of VR's rising popularity? I'm sure that a fair few of you are familiar with these. This is a sample script from SLAM, a VR poetry experience, and a proposed method of script writing for VR. It utilized the idea of color-coordinated quadrants to make it apparent where things were happening in a 360 space, inclusive of above and below. On the other side of the page, we have a template proposed by Vargas, who wished to standardize the writing process for VR. She argued that the quadrant method would impede the momentum in creating an industry standard. Where the quadrant method uses 6 quadrants and multiple colors to highlight space and location and direction, Vargas's would only use purple to indicate interactive elements. To me, these both hold their pros and their cons, the foremost being accessibility. Neither of these methods are particularly friendly to neurodivergent or colorblind writers. Purple is remarkably close to black, and the multiple colors can be quite jarring to focus on. But this isn't to say that they don't have their merits. After all, we are all seeking new ways in which to explore how we write for a virtual world. From across a variety of creative interviews, we have been reminded again and again that this is a new age of technology, one that's here for the long haul. Because of that, I offer the argument that to standardize the writing process this early on is rather short-sighted. We are a creative industry, and in a market of new technology, it is imperative that we continue to push the boundaries of what's available to us from a variety of angles. As seen with SLAM, VR is not just a field for education or game development, it's an avenue to explore poetry, to explore theatre and storytelling in all of its forms. But one thing remains key with the virtual world. When we put on the headset, we become part of that world. So autonomy is a huge part of the virtual experience. It's how we interact with every element of the world in which we're now in. This gives us the ability as writers to redefine our understanding of story structure. Of course, ideally, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But where do we have that? Whose perspective are we seeing the story through? If we interact with one element, does that close or open a door to another element? And how can we make an immersive world that feels tailored to the audience, that provides them the autonomy to make choices and to influence the path of the story? And from this, how do we direct them without shoehorning our audience into a set narrative? Well, we already have those answers. They're in the way that we use our senses and the environments we provide to stimulate that. These are our focus when directing the story and planning out our scripts. It's also why I have found bias for the quadrant method. It utilizes the idea of things happening in space as opposed to just a set of interactive points listed. We can plan as writers where our directions will guide from. In this sense, our writing is a guideline for a multitude of outcomes. And I'd argue that this is something I can easily call like a dungeon master mentality. If you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, I'm sure you know that it's the players who guide the story. Of course, it's a virtual world built on story writing and coding, so not every outcome can be randomly left to chance. It doesn't work that way, but we can plan it in our design. We can plan where triggers lie. We can plan which interactions will lead to another, and should that interaction get interrupted, we can lay down tracks for diversions in our story. This is a method we can use to direct the story whilst maintaining an illusion of autonomy. So how does this apply to Terra, the story I and my colleagues designed for a television production? We wanted to adapt this for VR just to see if it was possible and to see how we might explore this process. That meant reimagining how we would approach this. What were we aiming for the story to be? A game, an educational experience, an immersive story where you as the player are part of the family on their journey through space. For me, this came down to a few elements. What was our story? Where was it set? What was our stage? And whose point of view will we see the world through? Well, that became something easy to simplify. We took the trailer and used the introduction. Our story would be the intro. It would allow the player or audience to enjoy a cutscene through space, give them a settling period in which to adjust to and learn their VR controls when their character spawns within the scene. We'd keep the setting tied within the bounds of the spaceship, and that defined where our staging would be and what was available to interact with. At the start of the experience, during the settling period, we'd allow the audience a choice. Whose point of view did they want to experience this story through? And as such, how would we cater that per point of view, be it their own or one of the characters? This was something I could only learn through trial and error, and I decided to test this through writing for a couple of different point of views, the individual and the character. The one I'm showing here is the point of view for the individual. The individual point of view is your view, the audience view. In this, I tailored interactions and dialogue options to fit those point of views. As an individual, you would be part of the family, but omniscient in the world that you could explore. Your dialogue options would have more choices, which in turn could alter certain interactions. Should you approach your mother or father, you had the ability to trigger a scene that would take you on a short detour around an interesting planet. Which planet that would be randomized for a unique experience each time. Should you interact with your siblings, you had the chance to bicker or scheme or play a mini game within the story, like you might play on a long road trip in a car. On the flip side, should you play from the point of view of one of the characters, in this case Kelvin, you would be given the chance to learn more about who this character is that you're embodying, and your dialogue options would be truer to the character with room for natural choice. The interactions available to you would also be more character-driven. This continued the idea of autonomy and flexibility, much like we get from RPG games, as they focus heavily on the narrative and less on the game mechanics. When writing these, I tried to utilize the best aspects of the two script writing methods shown earlier. Rather than having each line of text multicolored and kind of hard to read, I highlighted those quadrants through brackets, Q1, Q2, and so on. I also highlighted the interactive elements in a similar way to the proposed standardized method. However, instead of relying on purple, I opted to just create clarity using them as action titles. They would list interactive options below, clearly on one line, to avoid cluttered paragraphs. This was only a small piece of exploration into how I could direct and steer this story through a player's eyes. There is boundless room to improve on this and develop these ideas further. But I open the question to you, which I hope you have many of your own in the Q&A. Is this a practical method of storytelling? We have seen the world of VR open up avenues to so many creative walks of life, writers from TV, documentaries, poetry, and more. So what expertise can we bring to the table? With so many perspectives at hand, we have the largest sandbox in which to explore. We have been handed a variety of tools to grab hold of and push forward to keep developing the way in which we can tell a simple or complex story. I can still remember the first time I went to a theatre and I learned that how the whole room was used to tell a story. The music, the lighting, the stage was never just a stage. It extended beyond that, into the audience seating and into the rafters. And that's what VR brings to us in a digital setting, the ability to guide our audience, our players, our new creatives into and through a story they are part of. Having said this, I'd like to reiterate that to shackle our methods of writing so early on in a brand new field will only serve to put limitations on our creative development. I'll end this here with the encouragement that we should all keep testing these boundaries. VR gives us an unlimited potential for development, and through our direction, through our scripts, and the breakdowns of our world building, we can truly build an immersive narrative. But I will pass you back to Ileana, who will be presenting for Leroy, who is absent, who will discuss the ins and outs of how we implement our stories for scripts into storyboarding for virtual reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stevie. You are challenging us with some really interesting questions, and you're really putting our mind into some areas of thought which we have never considered before. So let's see one of the experiments that our colleague Leroy has undertaken during this process of pondering over VR production.
Ivan, can you mute yourself? I'll try to mute him. Give me a second. Okay, sorry for that. Please go ahead. Hello, hello. Do we have our speaker?
Yes, I was just trying to find out how to play it with the sound, because there will be sound here on this video. Lucas, if you just give me.
Yeah, so when you click on share screen, you select the actual screen or window, and on the bottom you have two tick boxes.
Share computer and sound.
And also, if you have a video, it's optimized for video or something like that. There is a box
Okay,
for
I'm
that.
on it.
Perfect.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, it's perfect.
Hi, my name is Leroy Dice, and today I'm going to present the storyboarding and storytelling aspect of this VR panel. Since we're coming from a storyboard and previous perspective, I would like to discuss tools and methods that we can incorporate in our exploration of VR storyboarding. Before I get into the meat of storyboarding with and for VR, I would like to outline the purpose of storyboarding. The main thing to consider in storyboarding is that it's used to communicate and translate the visuals from script to screen. These visuals are used to pitch ideas to the director and different departments to communicate the base level of prep work required for any given scene. Storyboarding is a tool for quick iterations and not only helps in pre-production, but can also be used as an effective method to pitch for funding. Here are the key elements of storyboarding that remain universal even in the VR workflow. It's efficient in speed and economical, being a useful tool for planning. It identifies the major beats and plans for continuity in storytelling. Using these characteristics, we can move on to identify the requirements for VR. What makes VR storytelling different? Since the very beginning of filmmaking, our means of communicating visuals was captured within a simple 2D plane. This is called framing. Using the fixed frame, we can easily compose a shot, show the audience exactly what we want them to see, and create depth in creating the illusion of 3D within this fixed 2D plane. However, in VR, we can only suggest framing through composition since the user is given free rein in a 360 frameless environment. Before we find solutions to framing, I'd like to suggest the difference between games and films and what VR has to offer in relation to these. Conventional film involves a more passive form of consuming entertainment, whereas in both games and the use of VR, it always requires a certain level of interactivity. Interactive films and VR films attempt to combine the two. However, I would like to discuss the potential options for VR games without involving too much interactivity from the user. The main problem of VR film is attention. How can we as filmmakers control what the viewer sees so as to not miss pivotal story elements? Logan Dwight mentions that film is all about controlling the viewer's attention by framing subject matter. However, we lose this control entirely, giving the viewers control over what they focus their attention on. To grasp a user's attention, one must understand the different types and learn about the psychology of attention. Selective attention is obtained by intensive changes in the environment. Dividing attention suggests that a user requires directed attention only one at a time, whereas sustained attention is a combination of previous types to involve the viewer for a long period of time. Let's begin with some of the solutions of obtaining attention. The first idea is the cone of focus. Understanding the focus in VR is broken up into primary, secondary, and tertiary will allow us to choreograph action according to their importance. Let's begin with some of the solutions of obtaining attention. First idea is the cone of focus. Understanding that focus in VR is broken up into primary, secondary, and tertiary will allow us to choreograph action according to their importance. Primary action is what we filmmakers want the audience to focus on. Secondary action are areas that support and keep the user involved in primary attention. Tertiary represents the extremities of low interest to keep the viewer immersed in primary and secondary zones. It is important to note that the angle of view is also difficult in this area, as we will later discuss. Guiding action is within the primary and secondary that takes a user into different areas of focus. If the viewer shifts their position, the primary action and other zones shift accordingly. Here is an example from the film Pearl. A simple shift in alignment of objects, in the case of the film, the characters, can increase and divert areas of attention. As seen below with the image of the baby, most attention is focused on the baby's face. However, changing the alignment towards the text causes the area of focus to spread into the words. Guiding action and shifting attention also depends on comfortable viewing angles. Comfortable fields of view vary from 90 degrees to 154. However, this may vary depending on whether the user is seated or standing. Distance also plays an important role in attention, since humans have evolved to pay more attention to objects closer to them. The sweet spot in VR space ranges between 0.5 to 10 meters. Beyond 20 meters, objects become almost entirely unnoticeable. One major aspect of grasping user attention through VR are points of interest. A monotonous image, as evidenced in the Icelandic rocks, have 0 points of interest, which encourages the viewer to look around for areas of focus. One major aspect of grasping user attention through VR are points of interest. A monotonous image, as evidenced in the Icelandic rocks, have 0 points of interest, which encourages the viewer to look around for areas of focus. Whereas in the Japanese tram scene, there are several points of interest: the people, the environment, the conductor, etc. It's important to note that too many points of interest can cause a zero POI effect. Moving on to the types of storyboarding for and with VR. There are several combinations that can be encouraged depending on what's being produced, a few of which I will go over in the next few slides. Despite the ever-growing variety of tools and software, one universal aspect of storyboarding remains tried and true: thumbnailing. It covers most important elements and will remain in use till Neuralink replaces the efficiency and speed that it provides. Conventional methods of storyboarding, despite many attempts to keep 2D relevant in this storytelling space, seems too many efficient tools are on the rise to depict important elements of primary, secondary, and tertiary action within the VR space. Therefore, in this space, it is important to note that these tools remain only relevant within the first iteration of visualizing during thumbnailing or immediately from script. Software like Blender, combining efficient methods of 2D sketching and 3D modeling, allows users without a VR headset to involve themselves in the creation of VR or 360 stories. Creating a mixture of blocking out 3D assets while sketching performance allows a mixture that is extremely powerful, not to mention the accessibility of cameras and animation tools to create animatics. However fascinating, several aspects of this method can and will be replaced by VR technology. Previs photography. Apart from utilizing sketches in both the conventional and hybrid methods, movies such as I Am Mother have taken to VR pre-visualization to photograph and prepare images before production or building sets. Despite the cumbersome activity of blocking out 3D in a realistic manner for live action, this allows the story artist and filmmaker to fit the boards to an almost accurate version to the set being built. Storyboarding in VR increasingly replaces the hybrid and pre-visualization methods, utilizing tools like AnimVR and Storyboard VR directly. The only shortcoming is that a creator requires an expensive piece of equipment to involve themselves in VR, but this is becoming more and more accessible to people every day. Finally, I would like to showcase what we have been discussing in our project Terra. The idea here is to accommodate for various viewpoints within a given scene that allows the audience the choice of different perspectives. Lighting cues and action will be planned in accordance to the primary action within a scene. In conclusion, storytelling in VR will heavily depend on understanding the psychology of people and learning more and more as filmmakers and entertainment artists the methods of design that will actively capture the user's attention. Since film poses many difficulties in allowing a fine balance between active and passive engagement, a story artist and filmmaker must actively participate in identifying the key elements of story efficiently and effectively to then proceed in developing and employing methods that support guiding the user's attention in VR. I'll now hand it over to my colleague Molly Babington, who will discuss with you the different types of immersion in VR.
Thank you for that very interesting presentation. Iliana, I was thinking, should we afford having like 5 minutes break now, or we just continue with the presentations?
Yes, Lucas, that would be a good idea.
Okay, so maybe we can break for 5 minutes to grab some quick coffee. I will put our lovely loop video with information about the speakers, and we see each other in another 5 minutes, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I think we can slowly go back now. So I will pass to moderator. Iliana, are you ready?
Yes, Lucas, I'm ready. Hope everyone had a nice break, and now we can move on with the next interesting topic, which is presented by Molly Babington. Molly, floor over to you.
Thank you, Iliana. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes?
Yes, perfect.
All right, sweet. So I will share my screen now. So just bear with me a second. Okay, almost there. Present. There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes?
Cool. All right. So I'll be talking about what creates a sense of immersion and how important is fidelity for creating immersive experiences. So immersion is often discussed during the topic of virtual reality, rather like biscuits and tea. But what is immersion and why is it important? To put it simply, immersion is about being immersed within the context of the setting. To be immersed is to feel surrounded, completely and utterly involved, and to feel like you are really experiencing something, whether it be there or not. So why is virtual reality so relevant? Virtual reality, or rather its concept, has potentially been around for a long time. The exact origins of virtual reality are disputed, partly because of how difficult it has been to formulate a definition for the concept of an alternative existence. The development of perspective in Renaissance Europe created convincing depictions of spaces that did not exist, in what has been referred to as the multiplying of artificial worlds. Other elements of virtual reality appeared as early as the 1860s. However, it is depicted as a relatively new toy due to their headsets that have been released at a more affordable consumer price. For the first time ever, virtual reality has become an accessible tool for artists and designers alike. These new headsets currently offering a wide range of interaction within the virtual world in the form of screens and controllers, allowing the player to look around and participate in the digital domain. So what is immersion? Immersion is a unique experience connected with the world of virtual reality. The user has the power to interact with this world. This unique combination, where the user can immerse as well as interact with the simulations, is known as telepresence. Thus, the user forgets about his real-world scenario, forgets his present identity, situation and life, and immerses him in the world of imagination through adventure and exploration. He gets more focused about his newly created identity inside the virtual reality world. There's also different types of immersion to consider. Tactical immersion is experienced when performing tactile operations that involve skill. Players feel in the zone while perfecting actions that result in success. Strategic immersion is more cerebral and is associated with mental challenge. Chess players experience strategic immersion when choosing a correct solution among a broad array of possibilities. Narrative immersion occurs when players become invested in a story and is similar to what is experienced while reading a book or watching a movie. There's also different data types to consider when discussing immersion, such as depth of information, which can necessarily include anything and everything, starting from the resolution of the display unit, the graphics quality, and the effectiveness of the audio and video. It is the amount of data received by the user through their senses, such as sight and sound. Breadth of information is a number of sensory dimensions presented simultaneously. Any virtual environment can be designated as having a wider breadth of information whenever it stimulates all the human senses. There's also the absorption trait. Of course, players have some say in how immersed they get in a game. Some people just have more spatial ability and can build those mental models of game worlds more readily and make them more vibrant. And researchers have found that people with an absorption trait, which means that they're quicker to get fascinated by something and drawn into it, something I like to think of as the fanboy gene. Other times, the player takes a more active role. Some players simply want to believe in the illusion and will induce their own bias towards accepting the I am there hypotheses. In this state, they'll require less confirmatory information to accept that hypothesis, and less disconfirming information to reject it. Thus is also similar to the idea of suspension of disbelief, where players willfully ignore stuff that doesn't make sense. Researchers have also pointed to a concept they call involvement, which is a media user's desire to act in the make-believe world, to draw parallel between it and its life. To me, this seems like an overly fancy way of saying some people like to roleplay, which leads to greater immersion. So I chose to do a case study on Half-Life Alyx and Skyrim VR. So why compare these two games? I chose to compare them as within the huge variety of VR games available, I wanted to select two that were rather similar to one another. I felt these games were both trying to achieve the same thing, to deliver an ultimate immersive experience by having the player feel like they are within a new world. One aims for a futuristic dystopia, and the other a historical fantasy. Both try to give the player freedom by providing plenty to interact with as they progress through the story, attacking enemies with a variety of weapons. Both games also utilize large, beautiful levels that feel immense and endless from the point of view of the player. One game I feel manages to create an immersive experience, while the other I feel falls just short. So I have a little clip to play here. Ooh. And I can't mute the audio, so I'll just have to talk over it. You might not be able to hear it. It's not too important. So, first impressions for Half-Life Alyx. I recently had the opportunity to experience Half-Life Alyx in an Oculus Rift headset. The headset included two controllers, connecting my hands to the in-game virtual hands. The experience was nothing short than breathtaking. The game began with me standing on a balcony in a futuristic city looking out over rooftops as spaceships and advanced drones flew around. Pedestrians and robots alike walking around below, and the mother of all alien ships on the horizon in front of me. The view was overwhelming, with so much to take in. What made this experience so unique is how much it surprised me. I hadn't expected to feel as immersed as I did. It felt like I was really there. I was no longer in my flat in my hometown. I was in a futuristic city, surrounded by aliens and robots. Being able to look around was something that I had expected. So despite the beautiful view, that wasn't what did it for me. What made it immersive was the fact that I could pick up anything, to be able to reach down and grab things, to hold them, inspect them, then launch them into the air as if they were right in front of me, as if they were really in my hands. That was unexpected. Whilst playing Skyrim, if my video will play... There we go. While playing Skyrim, I found it didn't quite match the experience I'd had playing Half-Life Alyx. And at first I couldn't understand why. There was a slight disconnect between myself and my virtual self, as the controls weren't quite so intuitive. Whilst wearing the headset, I can't see the buttons on the controller. I can only feel for them. So as a relatively new VR user, I had a lot of difficulty and had to keep lifting the headset to see which button was which. Also, when sprinting in the game, the fast-paced movement made me feel very motion sick and uneasy, as my brain told me I was moving while my body knew that I wasn't. So what makes Half-Life Alyx immersive? There's beautiful sound design that surrounds you and gives you a sense of space. Advanced physics, giving objects some feeling of weight as you lift them and throw them. Large amount of objects to interact with that allow the environment to behave as you would expect it to. Clever level design that allows the levels to feel dense and populated with no visible borders to better simulate the real world. Attention to detail within the textures and materials to aid the imagination into imagining what they would feel like. The game is made for VR, so the experience is catered for it, with not too much moving around, not too fast-paced, plenty to see and pick up, and very detailed environments. There's also strong linear storytelling that drives each scene forward. So what makes Skyrim not immersive? The game is not made for VR, with a lack of interactable objects and some poor mechanics. There's very limited interaction with the controllers, as you can only hold a sword, shoot and bow and arrow, you cannot open doors, etc. Lower quality graphics detract from the realism and remind you constantly that you are in a game and not the real world. There's poor sound design that doesn't give you a surround sound experience, and poor storytelling with many characters and locations that do not drive the plot/story forward in any way and create a feeling of disconnect, which is a common issue in open world games. As the game designers try to fill these levels with characters that you can speak to, not every interaction necessarily drives the story forward, and too many random interactions can detract from the immersive experience. So why is fidelity important for immersive experiences? I feel the aim of these games is to create the most immersive experience possible. The personal touch of the headset, allowing players to look around and interact with their environment in such an individual way, is in essence the goal. Fantastic games have been created for computers or video game consoles. The goal here is not to replicate what has been done prior, but to reinvent a new way to participate within the context of a game. The current technology requires a certain amount of suspension of disbelief to be truly immersed, and the goal of fidelity is to aid in this. If the goal is to be immersive, the best way to start is to be realistic. If the headset creates the realistic feeling of standing within the virtual environment, then what better way to complement that feeling than with realistic graphics? If the goal is to be immersed, then by making the environment as realistic and believable as possible will only add to that experience as the player feels they are really there. I experienced this myself when playing Half-Life Alyx, as the high quality textures and realistic environment gave me the most immersive experience I'd ever felt. This is not to say that realism is the only desired outcome, of course, or the only one that would work, but it does require less suspension of disbelief. So we then applied all of this research and knowledge to our Terra project to create a little VR experience. After doing all this research, it was time to put it to the test with one of our own projects, Terra. We wanted to see if we could create our own immersive experience by combining all of our skills together. My focus was on the 3D assets, and my role involved helping to create some of the characters and setting up the scene in Unreal Engine. We used Unreal and Maya, as these are industry standard softwares, with Unreal Engine especially becoming more and more popular due to its real-time technology. Blender was also used for some tasks such as assigning materials due to its speed and efficiency and easy compatibility with Unreal. As already shown, we had to put together an animatic for a teaser and developed previs according to that animatic. We chose one scene from the teaser to demonstrate a proof of concept for how the VR would work. My research into data types proved to be very helpful, such as depth of information and breadth of information. It demonstrated the need to provide as much interaction and stimulus as possible. To achieve this, the idea was to allow the player to switch views around the scene, so they can either observe from around the ship or in the perspective as one of the characters, therefore providing a slightly different experience each time and allowing the player a certain freedom to explore. As for fidelity, of course this project is not realistic, and that's because it's set in a cartoony environment. However, we were able to introduce elements of believability by adding elements such as the surrounding planets and stars. In the future, we also hope to texture the environment to make them feel like real surfaces and to also add to the overall look and feel of the scene. So the goal here is not realism, but to create an environment that is believable. So here is our final product inside of Unreal Engine. The player/user can look around and switch the view camera to see the scene from different points of view. We hope to develop this proof of concept in the future by adding further interactivity and educational elements to allow the user to learn about the planets through the characters. So I want to thank everybody for listening and end this panel with a quote. Storytelling is communication. There is no limit to the tool that we use. When a new tool is available, the only way to know its limits is to try. I hope this panel has inspired you to try. Thank you for listening, and I'll now pass back to Ileana.
Thank you very much, Molly. This was very inspiring talk and very interesting result from all the work you've done. I will now say thank you to all the panelists and give an opportunity for questions and answers for the audiences. If there are any questions, we have another 15 minutes. So please feel free to put your questions forward now. I'm not sure.
You can also use the chat. You can also use the chat if you're maybe shy to speak up on the camera. So
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
I was going to say I have a question. The guys mentioned playing to an audience. Molly mentioned the importance of immersion. Do you think we're moving away from creating audience members and we're actually sort of creating witnesses to what's going on? And do you think this is having a positive or negative effect with engaging with the story?
Can you hear the question?
Sorry, I seem to have a lot of feedback on the mic.
I heard it. I don't know if anyone else did.
I did as well. Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. You mentioned playing to an audience and the importance of immersion, but do you think with immersion we're moving away from creating audience members and we're making viewers witnesses to what's going on? And do you think being a witness has a positive or negative effect on engaging with the story?
I guess with audience, when you define audience, when it comes to, especially when you kind of come to storytelling, you have to know your kind of audience. And when it comes to thinking about your audience, you play to a certain type of audience. You don't play to a particular type of witness. There's a sort of slight difference. So if your audience is, say, children, you think about, okay, what does this group of audience want? You don't go for what do these witnesses want. It's a bit of it is an interesting, funny, an interesting way to call them witnesses instead of an audience per se. But you do get to hear that witness phrase a lot. So you do get that, and you do hear that a lot in marketing as well. Like, get ready to witness this, witness this Christmas event and all that stuff. But it's even in theatre or even at a circus, they are still referred to as an audience. Even in magic shows, audiences, theatres, stage production, even street performances, they are still referred to as an audience, even if it is a like a live or surround experience.
Thanks.
I can see one question in the chat group. Somebody just posted the question. If you don't mind me to read it, Hannah Zavolodko asks where to start studying VR direction for school children. Molly, would you like to take this one?
You know what, I was just about to ask if I could. I would say that, so VR directions for school children. I can't answer specifically like for school children because I just don't know. But in terms of studying for VR in general and VR directions, I would say that all starts with storytelling. Whatever kind of VR experience that you're trying to create, if you're trying to create one, that can immerse school children, adults, anybody into a setting, then that is storytelling. And I would highly recommend Escape Studios for the storytelling side of things, because that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been learning how to tell stories, how to direct in film and in VR. And that is how we were able to put together Terra for VR. So it all starts with a story. And I think if you learn to tell stories, then the medium, whether it's VR, whether it's film or games, you know, that all comes next. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Molly.
Can I ask another question? You mentioned the importance of interactivity, and this has been something that's been mentioned quite a lot through all of the presentations. And there seems to be this line between games and a kind of cinema experience. But do you think a VR experience has to be interactive to be really effective?
Am I okay to answer this one?
You go first. You go first.
Thank you, Austin. I would say, like, it's a very fine line to draw. I think we're all still kind of learning the rules for VR and what it means, as it's such a new technology. In my opinion, I don't think it has to be interactive to be immersive, but I do think it helps based on my experience inside the headset, because being able to look around is one thing, but being able to actually reach down and, you know, press something, pick something up, just adds like a whole nother level to it. And I'm excited to see if, like, how that can be used in film going forward. I think it's too early for us to decide what the rules are, to say that, oh, you know, if it's a film, it can't be interactive, or it has to be interactive to be immersive. I think it's too early to tell. I think we have to explore the technology and find that out for ourselves. But that's just my opinion. Go for it, Austin. It's over to you.
I was just going to say, I don't think it needs to be interactive to be immersive. You can still have things happen around someone and they can still get an emotional reaction and recall it and recall to it. Like I mentioned, the cycles short, you get to experience the story unfold around you. You're in a home, you get to see it through its various stages, and you get like an emotional attachment to it since it has a very human, personal story unfolding in it. So I wouldn't say necessarily interaction is necessary for being immersive. You just need to work on the direction of it to make sure you play to those emotions so they get a more stronger reaction to it. It's almost like it's a magic trick in a sense. Same like in films, you kind of trick the brain into thinking they are there in a sense.
Okay, that's cool.
May I add on to this?
Yeah, please do.
I think it just comes down to engagement. What we get when we see, for example, real life outside of VR, when we go to a planetarium, we sit down in a singular space and we have sort of a movie projection experience happening around us, almost augmented reality, but not quite. But we can push that further with VR. We can have those experiences within a virtual reality where this is happening all around us and we are heavily engaged without having to actually interact with it. We can still be part of the moment. So it just depends on how you are handling that engagement and how you are presenting it to the audience or to the viewer. And in that sense, we get a lot more of an in-depth feeling of being part of this rather than just thinking, oh, well, we have to engage, we have to interact, or we have to have an objective to complete. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There is another question here in the chat. Again, it is Hannah. Hannah Zavolodko asks, what competencies should you have to start learning VR? More specific, digital competencies. Would anyone like to answer this question from the panelists?
I can give it a go.
Thank you, Stevie.
I think also based on the fact that you asked about school children earlier, it depends what age range you're sort of asking about in terms of competencies. If we're sort of bringing children into a new environment to learn these things, starting to learn VR, then you don't have to have a full-on competency. You can start at ground zero and work your way up. But if you're coming from, say, like an actual background within digital work, then you'll have a lot of those skills with you anyway. You will have taken them from your previous experience working with, say, 3D or working with coding. You can apply those to VR because at the end of the day, you are still just sort of creating a movie or a game. It's just that what you are applying it to is a different software or a different hardware, I suppose. And it's not necessary to, say, have a in-depth background in 3D animation to be able to work towards learning VR. I come from a 2D background. My skills in 3D were non-existent until I began working with Escape Studios, where I learned quite a fair bit. So it depends what level you are coming into VR, where your starting point will be. So I think you can start learning without having any sort of initial groundwork. You can start from square one and work your way up. It's a very open area to explore.
Thank you very much, Stevie. This was very insightful and very helpful. I will give the floor to the audience for any more questions.
I have one more, if that's okay. This is really probably closer to what Anastasia talked about. She mentioned, Anastasia mentioned a lot about the kind of positive feelings that you can get from VR and from an interactive experience. From the type of experience you can get in VR. But what do you think about the kind of negative experiences you can get from VR and the connection of that and sort of to things like depression and things of this nature? Because I know there's been quite a lot of kind of reporting on this and the kind of connections with people, you know, suffering from certain elements of depression because of spending time in a VR environment and games generally, really.
Sorry, do you mind to quickly repeat the question, because I
Yeah.
couldn't hear, my line kept
Oh, sorry.
interrupting your voice. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Basically, it was talking about, you know, in your presentation, you kind of talked a lot about the positive emotions that are linked to storytelling and storytelling in an immersive environment. But what are your thoughts on the kind of negative emotions that are associated to some of this, or have been sort of reported on with some of this, things like depression and that have been reported on from spending time in a VR and simulated environment, or even games environments in general, really?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it really depends on what you're using VR on. So, of course, if you are experiencing a violent game or a horror experience, of course, you will have negative impact. And I think that's mostly the negative way of talking about VR and game field in general, that we are overexposed on violence. So I believe that if you use virtual reality with a positive content, and you develop things specifically, for example, to help depressive people, it's gonna be difficult, you know, to have a negative experience. So I guess that you have to be careful in choosing what kind of experience you would like to have. I hope that I'm answering your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I may have a question now as well. I would like to go back to what you mentioned before about and actually in relation to what Hannah was asking about the skills and tools used. I don't know if it was just my impression, but I felt like you've used quite advanced tools like Unreal Engine, and you did a lot of 3D modeling. So this is, I would say, quite advanced level, even though you said you just started. It seems like you went all the way in. And so I was thinking, I felt like there was a bit of a different maybe approach. I don't know, maybe it's the difference between Europe and US. Like I was meeting storytellers from Los Angeles in January at MIT. Event, and they were talking, they were using Quill, they were using a tilt brush, so quite basic tools, maybe not very interactive, but that allowed them to draw stories very fast and without any kind of technical knowledge. I don't know, would you say this approach, would you dismiss this kind of approach, or would you say maybe that's what Hannah is asking about, maybe something simpler, something for that kids could grasp quite easily? Because I cannot imagine maybe school kids jumping straight into Unreal Engine or any of those more advanced tools.
Is there any candidate from the panelists to respond to this question?
I can respond if I may.
Yes, you can, please.
Hello. I would say that it's absolutely a very good point. We have been using some pretty advanced softwares, and that, at least from my personal experience, that comes from just a passion that we have for, animation and just kind of 3D in general. We're all very, especially myself, I'm very passionate about 3D. So it kind of comes from that. But by all means, if there are tools out there that can simplify the process and open that up to a wider audience who may not be as familiar with the 3D techniques, I don't know how that could ever be a bad thing. Like, that means that we have more people that are able to experience VR, that are able to develop for it, to help push the technology further. I see it all as, it's an art form. And just like with art, it's not about the tools that you use, it's about how you use them.
If I may add something.
Yes, please, Anastasia.
Yeah, actually, I've always had trouble with 3D. Iliana knows that quite well. And recently, I've been trying a program. It's a Danish new kind of development for virtual reality. It's called Anim VR. And I think it's pretty good. It allows you to draw directly into a virtual reality space. And it allows you to give to your drawing three-dimensionality. And it's quite a cheap program as well, compared to Quill, for example. So it's not that difficult to use as well. So I would suggest to give it a try if you are more keen to try something in 2D instead.
Thank you.
Just to add to this, Lucas, to your question, during the interviews for accepting new students in ESCAPE, we always have requested portfolios from the candidates, and we encourage and we accept people who have been able to use software which is available online, and they use extensively tools that are offered through the social media platforms such as Blender and some other software packages that allow people to download for free and experiment and explore and learn. So you would be surprised to see how advanced our candidates at Escape Studio and how prepared they are before they even step into the education in our school. So this is becoming a norm for this particular school as well. So yes, you are absolutely correct in posing this question, and it is interesting to see how many of you guys on the panel have been able to use these available free tools. Has anyone had any experience with Krita, for example, or any other 2D painting software, or any other VR tool available? And if you have anything to suggest here to our guests, that would be really useful. You can't think of anything? So I'll move on with the next question. Does anyone know about cortisol levels inside in VR also? I personally don't. If anyone in the panelists or in the audience can answer this question, please do.
I'm happy to give it a go.
Yes, please.
I had a little bit experience with. Are you okay? I had a little bit of experience with this myself. So when I was playing Half-Life Alyx, that game, I'm not gonna lie, is terrifying. There are a lot of monsters that get very kind of up in your face, and because it's so realistic, you know, it's absolutely terrifying. And I'm someone that has anxiety and, you know, gets pretty worked up about things anyway. So when I was playing that game, there becomes a point where I just can't play it anymore because I get too scared and I'm too anxious, and I'm almost like hyperventilating because I just can't play it. And I think this is something that needs to be considered, especially as kind of VR games, you know, continue to get even better and get more believable and more realistic. Because there becomes a point where like some of these games are just going to be too terrifying for the average user. And in my opinion, like what I would do to kind of help with this is maybe, I mean, there might even be some out there. I don't know. I'll be honest, I haven't checked. But if there are just like short experiences that are designed to be relaxing in VR, like designed to kind of be calming, to kind of like reassure and kind of make you unwind, make you calm down. So if you've just played like a really intense game or like a really scary game, or you've just had maybe you've been watching a horror film in VR and you need to relax, then you can switch to this kind of relaxing experience so that by the time you come off the headset, you're kind of left feeling sort of pleasant, happy and relaxed, as opposed to coming off and feeling very anxious and very stressed. I hope that answers the question.
I do want to add that one of the examples I used was actually Richie's plank experiment, and the setup for that is, as you saw there in the presentation, was actually a really rather simple one. It is literally just a person with a headset and they're just given a plank of wood and that's it. But when they experience it with the VR goggles on, just being on a plank, even if it's just on the floor, with the VR headset, feeling the sort of uneasiness you saw in those reactions. You had people swearing, the people talk about their palms were sweaty. If you actually go and look up the videos of Richie's plank experiments, you see people just crawling on the plank of wood. So yes, people do get that sort of high, almost that high adrenaline, that sort of like high experience that they didn't expect earlier. Their almost survival instincts almost kick in. That primal fear of heights just kicks in.
Thank you very much, Austin.
Would I be able to pipe in on this one?
Of course, please do.
So on the same level of stress levels, also connected to the earlier question about mental health in relation to gaming. This is kind of a really like subject that I love. But in terms of what Molly just brought up with how games could be too scary for people, we do have ways of already circumventing that within the gaming industry already, within the movie industry, books, etc. Those are content warnings, trigger warnings to let the viewer know what they are in for and what they're about to experience. games will always come with content warnings. We also have accessibility settings. This allows us to give the player the chance to determine, say, how extreme flashing lights might be, or how loud sounds might be. You can adjust audio lighting. You can decide whether or not this game is suited to you based on your needs. In terms of the next thing that Molly brought up, as in calming games, those exist. There are loads of these for VR, often called Daydream for VR. One example is Claro. It's just a really relaxing animated experience where you can just zone out in a lovely, beautiful world, looking at beautiful things, all really calming, lovely music. There's a lot of examples of those out there at the moment that you can enjoy and experience for yourself if you happen to own a VR headset. I do not. I'm quite sad about this. And in terms of stress levels and mental health, currently VR is being used quite often to help treat mental health issues. It has been currently used, I cannot give you the exact names or research centers. This is slightly medical knowledge beyond my expertise, but to help people cope with their depression, help people cope with their anxiety, providing calming experiences, providing safe, controlled environments where they can work with their therapist through scenarios. There are articles on the Journal of Psychopharmacology, I think it's called, that do talk about the impacts of the physiological responses to stress in virtual realities. And in that sense, it is a really beneficial hardware and software to use for people recovering. It's also being currently used to help people with, say, Alzheimer's and dementia, helping them work through issues there. I can't remember where it was. It may have been in America that they were testing this out, but it's something that I read about quite recently. There's lots of ways that VR is being implemented to help mental health, and I think that's a really wonderful thing, especially considering what was brought up earlier, where a lot of people were experiencing depression from playing games. It's not necessarily that that's the case. The case here is that what happens is that people are experiencing a lot of stress outside of their lives, and they turn to books, they turn to films, they turn to games as a way to escape that. So it becomes a safe place to exist. It becomes your comfort place. And it's where you want to be the most, because you're no longer surrounded by the things, your outside stressors. You could be your work, your home life, your school life. These are places that we are going to for support. I know for myself, growing up as a neurodivergent child, I often delved myself into books and to games because these were worlds where the characters were my friends. They provided a safe space. They provided an avenue for me to explore myself and grow as a person, where outside of that, didn't really have those opportunities. They provided ways for me to socialize through gaming, even if they were like NPCs, or if I was just interacting with people online through, say, MMOs. It was providing me a social influence and a social bubble. Of course, there are always negatives to that, depending on the groups that you interact with. You can always get, bad people online, just as well as you can get good people online. And it comes down again to who you're interacting with and the kind of environments that you are centering yourself around. So there are their pros, there are their pros and there are their cons. But overall, I do think it's quite a beneficial thing, and as it is currently being used in a lot of beneficial ways. Sorry,
this is an excellent answer to the questions and to the last question I can see in the chat. Thank you very much, Stevie. This was very, very beautifully introduced. And also, there is one part of this question which I can see here. How can that be managed if everyone is an individual and every individual is different? Is there any way to measure this? Are there any apps? Is there anybody willing to respond to this one? The ability to simulate and the ability to relax seems very possible. How can that be managed, as every individual is different? And is there any way to measure this? Okay, well, in conclusion to this wonderful panel discussion, I can suggest an answer to this one. We find a way to manage this through creating the stories, and this is a wonderful experience, and you can only measure it when you experience it. So that would be my answer in conclusion to this. And I would like to say thank you, Lucas. I don't know how much more time do we have, but maybe we are going a little bit over it. So I will give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Iliana. So yeah, I think that was a wonderful third day of our symposium, which explored in great depth the topic of storytelling. We had a bit of a glimpse on it yesterday, so I encourage also people who didn't see our yesterday symposium to have a look as well on the recording. However, today we really went into, we made our hands dirty and we really went deep into the storytelling. And I think you presented, Iliana, and your speakers, you presented a wonderful overview of how the process looks like. So from storyboards all the way through to the ultimate solution, right, which is digital and explorable through virtual reality technology. So I think a round of applause for you for a wonderful journey. And I hope people will, since we live stream it and it will be available as a video, I think it will be a nice video for people to explore, to learn about this topic, and will be available on our Compact website as well. However, yeah, I think we can leave one last minute for people if they have any other question, just to conclude this discussion here today. Maybe there is somebody who was shy till today, but maybe there is still some pressing question. No? Okay, otherwise, thank you very much. Thank you all the distinguished speakers. Thank you, Iliana, for moderating so well today. And yeah, I hope this is just the beginning, and I believe there'll be more of that, more of a symposia of this kind. Our Compact project will go on now till the end of the year still, so stay tuned for more, and there'll be more materials and interesting videos available, so stay tuned. But till then, I would like to wish everybody have a good night, I suppose, unless you're coming from Los Angeles or somewhere. Yeah, I think have a good night, and yeah, once again, thank you all. That was it for today, and yeah, bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.